I'm Justin Franson here with Jack Broudy, the infinitymovement.com. Jack and I are longtime friends and colleagues in developing coordination of athletes, and Jack is a tennis pro that's coached unbelievable tennis players throughout his entire career, has more top-ranked junior players than most coaches have ever seen, and in addition to that, he's an inventor, and he's created an unbelievable movement system, and it's an infinity movement system. He didn't really create it, he just figured out what the universe, how it works and how it flows, and he just started flowing with it in a figure-8 movement system, and he's built a business out of it. He's built an online academy out of it. He's built an infinity movement system, teaching corporations out of it. He's taught the top tennis players, in the country this movement system, teaching them how to flow in the figure-8. And when you're in that figure-8, you're more accurate and you're more powerful and you're more consistent. So you have so much because you're just flowing right in that pocket, right where you're supposed to be. Now, Jack Broudy started off with the 8-board, and 8board.com is where it all started. And this little, it's like two lazy Susans on it. You could widen your stance out, close it, but it just flows, and you move your feet in and out. And I kid you not, Peter Smith, who is one of our other speakers, I said, hey, did you get on that 8-board lately? He's like, I trained on it today. The day we filmed Peter Smith, he was on it working with his athletes at USC men's tennis. And you know how many Division I championships he's won. These are some of the tools that the best coaches in the country have in their bag. And not only that, when I'll get up and speak in front of audiences, instead of swaying back and forth, I'll just do a little figure-8 movement system with my hips, and it connects me to a whole different level, and I just start to feel the flow of the universe. So, Jack, that's a little intro for you. Great to see you. Thanks for being a part of us, part of Go Beyond Summit, and joining us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It sounds like if you're doing the figure-8 on your own, I might have to get you another board.
Yeah, well, I still have a bunch, and we use them all the time. So thanks for stepping off the court today with us to join us for a little bit and share your inventions and your whole technique and your methods behind it, and educate the masses and really teaching them how to get in the flow of the figure-8. Now, Jack and I go back. He's one of the original crew that came in over at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla at Shiley Pavilion, and almost 20 years ago. And so Jack comes in, he's like, hey, I have these great figure-8 movement systems. It's all math-based, it's all science. So he and his partner actually created some amazing math equations that proved that they were more accurate when they hit the ball in a figure-8 on the 45 angle, and created this, this amazing business behind it. And it's something that every hitting, throwing, swinging sport will actually employ. And there may be tight figure-8s or they might be bigger. So, Jack, take us back to Scripps Clinic in La Jolla when you started coming in, bringing in your 8-boards. Well, I purchased lots of them from you.
Thank you.
And and would sell them and use them. And so you and Bosu were the two products that
made out of wood
that both gravitated towards me, and it just made sense on how the universe works and how to train people and take them out of a linear movement system and get them in a figure-8. That's the essence of athleticism and what we did with training athletes. And so let's go back there. Tell us some of your stories. How did you get started? How did you create this? And take us back into the Scripps Clinic days.
Well, actually, way back when, thanks. It's nice to be here, and I'm very happy to be a part of the summit. About 20 years ago, Dean Brittingham, guy you worked for, great guy. He ended up with the Olympics out in Colorado, right? He heard about me and contacted me, phoned me, and back in the days when they used telephones, and 20 years ago, and he said, hey, I've seen your product, I've got one here, can you come in and explain it to me, give us a little pitch on it. So we started way back then talking about this idea of continuous motion. And tennis has always been, maybe like a lot of other sports, kind of dumbed down to, basically the haves and the have-nots. You're a great athlete, you go in this pile over here with the great athletes. Not a good athlete, you're with the beginners, and eventually you quit because you'll go to studies or violin or piano because you're the have-nots. And we found a common link of all the great athletes and the way they moved, whether it was basketball players, surfers, we're both surfers, skiers, snowboarders, tennis players, and golfers. We were on a quest, Paul Mayberry and I, my partner, we were on a quest to find out where this effortless power, everyone was using the word effortless when, starting with Agassi, but then really moving on with players like Rios and Federer. Federer was the one who really encapsulated the effortless movement. And we were always obsessed with this effortless power and this, looking like you're so loose that you'd be on the edge of being out of control, but somehow everything you hit went in. So you weren't out of control at all, but it sort of seemed that way because you were so loose. And so we were really on a quest to figure out what it was that made the natural athlete a natural athlete. In fact, I ended up recently writing a book called Secrets of the Natural Athlete, which pretty much has what I'm going to talk about today, which is first this idea of not stopping and starting. Right? In tennis, it's always been get your racket back or load up on one foot and hold it there and then come pouncing off that shot. We noticed that the best players, like I bring Rios up because he was a very short guy. He was 5'8" or below, and he was, toying guys much bigger than him, like Safin, and he had wins over Sampras. I mean, he was a great player for a little guy, and he was one of those effortless, natural-looking players. And Agassi, we were fascinated by him and Sampras's effortless-looking serve.
Right.
And then, of course, like I said, it all came in one package when Federer hit the scene. So Paul approached me, actually Paul Mayberry, because I had just finished a book called The Real Spin on Tennis, which was back in 95, 96. And he approached me right after that saying, hey, I've got some thoughts. I loved your book. And, you have a lot of similarities. You're sort of dabbling in what I'm really interested in. Paul's a great tennis player. He's my partner in the business now. And he brought this idea, it's called anthroposophy. Google it, anthroposophy, and projective geometry.
Awesome.
And nonlinear motion. And there's a whole world of this stuff. If you start Googling Rudolf Steiner, you start Googling these things, and you'll see there's a whole world, academia, that the sports world knows nothing about. So what happened was we sort of got into this anthroposophical world and said, wow, look at all the similarities between Agassi's strokes, the way he really, he stood so close to the baseline, but he still seemed to take a full stroke, a beautiful stroke, and had big topspin. So it wasn't like he blocked the ball. He actually took a full stroke and he stood closer than anyone else. So he was one of the first examples that I used. But we noticed the similarity was all these great players, these natural-looking players, they didn't have any hitches in their game. It was very effortless and beautiful, and it was a continuous motion. And we compare that to the continuous motion of a bullwhip, right? The premise behind a bullwhip is you take a large mass, the grip, the handle, and you move it slowly in this figure eight, right? This S curve, figure eight. And through something called the law of conservation, you have to maintain, as this figure eight, this S curve travels down the rope, right? Travels down the whip. As it goes towards the lighter part of the whip, it has to maintain, through this law of conservation, it has to maintain the same energy that it had in the bigger motion up here. So as this figure eight got smaller and tighter and went towards the end of the tip of the whip, it produced a crack, right? And that's actually breaking the sound barrier. So that's how you get that speed and that power and that impact, just through this effortless motion. And something hit us and we said, wait a minute, that's the same type of thing we see with all the great players. They have this seemingly effortlessness, but as they get to the ball, right, they start in small, and then as they get out to the ball, it cracks. and they have that tip of the whip right out there at the head of the racket. So that was a very big discovery. That was a very big discovery that you get on this 8 board, and we invented the board after we realized this.
Right,
we said, how do we get people? How do we get people to do this figure 8? And we realized if they just held their fingers and moved in this figure 8, this infinity sign, see, you get it very simply. See that? Your hips start to lead. So you start with your hands leading, but then eventually your hips lead. So a small movement in here creates a large, big movement out there. And on the flip side, a large movement, like on a volley, can create a small movement at the head. You know how they say you just block the volley, right? But you don't really do it with your arm. You really hold your hand right at the hitting point, which we say is the 45-degree angle, right? Bisects the vertical and the horizontal.
Exactly.
It's the quintessential angle, right? Surfers surf at a 45-degree angle. Skiers come down 45 all the way down in a figure S all the way down the slope. So the 45 basketball players line their feet up when they're shooting a free throw at the 45-degree angle, right? They don't face it straight on. They angle themselves at a 45. So between this idea of a figure 8, starting small at the 45 and then ending up big at the 45, and then on the volleys, like I said, your hand doesn't hardly move at all, but there's power out there through the center of your body. So people saw it, but they saw it, the tennis motions in a linear fashion, thinking, oh, you see, the hand only moves like this, very little. But the hand really doesn't move at all on the volley. It really is the body. It's a body shot, and the hand really just sort of hangs out at the contact point, never leaves the contact point.
The dog wags the tail.
That's right, the dog wags the tail and not vice versa. So that's how it all really began. It was way back when. We've come up with some new products since then that challenge people and challenge their balance and bring verticality into it, right? Because a wave isn't just horizontal, right? And a tennis stroke isn't just horizontal. There's a verticality element to the stroke. So we started inventing these other products. You mentioned swinging and hitting sports, throwing sports.
Sure.
But also we sold this product back here, I'll show you in a minute, we sold that to the U.S. ski team. They bought a ton of those. I think I got the connection through Dean, actually. It was the U.S. ski and snowboard team, and they still use our products. They use the 8-board, and they use our Extreme 8-board still today. The way Peter Smith still uses the 8-board, but he uses some of the other products as well. So that's really where it all began, was this meshing of an intellectual world with this jock world, you know, because we thought the game was just way too dumbed down. I mean, get your racket back, follow through. You know, I mean, it really made it almost impossible for anyone who wasn't a great athlete and a lot of money to hit a lot of tennis balls to become a good tennis player. And I think America's proven that out, because we really haven't had a top 10 man in the world rankings for maybe almost a decade, since Andy Roddick and James Blake. So it's been at least a decade, and I think and we've brought this product to Emilio Sanchez. I brought it to him about 15 years ago. I'm not taking credit for all the players he's put out, but I know for a fact he uses the product. And once again, Peter Smith is one of my favorite people, and he's been great to us, and he's used the board, and he's been a big endorsement and proponent of the board. And he's had, what, 4 or 5 national titles in the last 10? 5 in the last 8 years?
6 years.
6 years.
Or 5 in the last 7.
5 and that's something like that. I mean, it's just unheard of. He's a great coach.
Skipped a year.
He's a great guy and a great coach, and the kids love him. I've spent a lot of time with him, both at Pepperdine and USC, and his team, and it's obvious the bond he's got. But I think some of the secret weapons, you know, he's an open-minded guy, and he was one of the first people that really grabbed onto this. I know he uses it for his golf game too. He always talks about that, how it helped his golf game that he plays a couple times a year. But so we feel like the proof is in the pudding, and look at the Americans. Even though they're not in the top 10, they're in the top 30, and we work with Stevie Johnson. Steve's father did that. We did one of these forums, and Justin spoke at it, and we had some golf pros, and Liz Massakayan, a volleyball great. And Peter Smith actually led off the whole show, but this was at Steve Johnson's tennis club right here in Orange County. And that was about, what, 10 years ago?
Probably more.
Maybe more.
Yeah.
Maybe 12 years ago. So, Steve Johnson's used the product from, 12 years old up, and Sam Query has used the 8 board, and I've given him lots of lessons, and his coach, Tim Schneibly, he, from 11 years old to 17, has used the boards and the method and everything. So we have had an effect on the top American players to date. And Coco Vanderway, she still has a board in her bag, but she's a big, strong girl, so she can carry it. It's an old wooden board. But when I bumped into her a couple years ago, she pulled it right out of the bag and said, hey, still get on it every day. And now we've got the Bryant brothers using the product. They really love it. They use our new products as well as the 8 board, and they like to use it in the hotel room and loosen up. But the whole idea really is we want to broaden the tennis world, because we feel like if everyone knew about this idea that you can play a perfect, a perfect game of tennis, as opposed to, well, he's got a weakness here and a weakness there, and that's his strength. But if you understood this figure 8 motion, we knew we could teach anybody, who's basically symmetrical, to move in a figure 8, hit a nice forehand, a nice backhand, beautiful volleys, a good service motion. It's all encapsulated right here in this one movement. Even the ice skaters. When I sold this to the U.S. ski team, the ice skaters, I heard, started taking it over, and they started, spinning around and around and around, and they love the product for, when they're off the ice,
right? Just
for balance. But just the idea of ambidexterity and a continuous motion is something that really, especially in tennis, it's never thought about. Because tennis is just seen as a one-sided sport. Yeah. And really... well,
you're playing in a box on straight lines, and so
right.
You get a lot of that mentality. And I know each of us had moments with a lot of those greats, like Sam Querrey and Tom Ritz introduced us to them, and we've had some. This product has touched so many amazing performers in tennis, and so and it continues to. And the history that we have on it, just it's unbelievable. And I remember back at Shiley when I had groups of junior national figure skaters that we would train, and these girls would get on and just spin like a top. They do like 14 spins and then step off and then bounce out of it, and it was so great of a rotational movement. Now you see with the X Games and all these, there's a whole nother dimension in sports. They're spinning and flipping at the same time, and so for me, this was one of the early products where we were able to really get the coordination in 360 plus movements for the athletes, so they got a really strong comfort level when they were rotational sports. And then we use it for rehab as well.
Right.
Rehabbing, right. When you're ACL, you use a rotational movement. Your knees flexed, and medial lateral rotation of a flexed knee. This thing helps start to turn it back on for you. Yeah,
people use it after knee surgery and hip replacements, and we've sold thousands of boards to rehab companies across the country and around the world. And I remember you used to use it with, you had me come out once using it with a football player, right? He was a quarterback back east.
Pro quarterback, yeah.
Right, and then a couple of pitchers for the Padres and hitters. So you sold them, I think. Didn't you sell them half a dozen boards to the Padres? Someone did.
Yeah, I sold a bunch.
Yeah.
So
the hitters use it with soft toss, and the key is, as Justin said before, it's about the dog wagging the tail. And so when you're told to turn your shoulders or to bring your racket back, that's the tail wagging the dog. It's really the center of your body that moves. And you see, and that's where you get that nice roundness. That's where a guy like Federer looks so effortless in his beginning stages of the forehand. He's just like this, feeling the racket just sort of tuck in like this, and then as he comes around the corner in his figure 8, his racket unravels into the hit beautifully.
Yeah.
And trying to explain natural performance in linear terms just won't work. It just won't work. I've seen them try it on television. they'll say, well, look how the service motion, his arm goes up and out. But really, it's up and out, and he used straight lines to show it. I can't remember who it was, and and I don't want to say if I remembered, but I was like, gee, how do you, it's more of a screwing down and a screwing up, right? See, almost like a tornado, a small movement in here, a small figure eight creates this larger movement at the top, and because you're moving everything at once, there's this absorption in your whole body. You absorb the hit in your whole body rather than hammering it with your arm and feeling it in your elbow or your shoulder.
Well said.
And so you kind of absorb the hit with your entire body.
Yeah, the summation of forces.
It's almost like Bruce Lee's 3-inch punch, the death blow, right? I mean, you'd think, well, how can someone kill someone, from this far away? But he welled up inside, right? He had that wave of a movement inside his body that came out to his arm and create that big power at the contact. That's sort of the same thing here. If you take it back from the contact, think to yourself, well, where would be the best point of contact for any stroke? It doesn't matter. Would it be facing the ball? Probably. You could probably get out furthest that way. And so this idea of the 45-degree angle, right? If you hit the ball right there, you can change directions easily. You can see your opponent. You can see the ball hitting the strings. It's all happening right at the 45. And I guess there's a few ways to get to that force between the ball and the strings, right? You want to press as much air out of the ball as you can. And at the same time, you want to get the most out of your strings, right? So they bend back the most. So that's really what force is about. So the question is, how do you push the air into the ball? And so I guess you could do it with your arm. That's one way, but you'd have to swing awfully fast, and that would hurt. Maybe you could rotate your shoulders in a semicircle. That's another way. And maybe you could even do what Jimmy Connors did, rotate your whole body like that, which was a very mechanical stroke, but it worked for him. He definitely met the ball right at the 45, and he rotated very well. Or you can do what we say, which is, do a figure eight that encompasses a much greater movement, a wave.
Now
and so it's that figure eight. So we feel that is the most efficient way to put force on the ball, to press air into the ball and to get the nicest bump off the strings. Excellent. Is that figure eight swing and that sine curve.
Excellent.
That goes out to the 45.
Excellent. Jack, that's fantastic. As you can see, there's so much to coach. I mean, in 20 minutes, he just gave you the most brilliant lesson on a figure eight movement system for hitting and throwing in any sport or any movement system for that matter. And it parallels into so many different sports. And so that's what we love about the figure eight movement system, the infinity movement system, and then the 8 boards and all the different products that Jack's developed. Now, Jack, show us some more of your products. Like I love this incline board, and we used to train on it and have everyone gets on them and spins on it and stands on it and uses that movement system. So tell us more about your other products.
Let me go backwards a little bit. We first wanted to disprove some of these common theories that are in tennis. Get your racket back and turn sideways. Rotate your shoulders with your racket back like this. As opposed to what we were saying, which was there's this idea of contrary motion, meaning it's impossible. I mean, it might not look off balance necessarily to start a forehand like this, loaded up on the back foot, but it's unbalanced in nature. So we created this product just to prove to people, just to show people, look, when your hips turn to the left, your arms have to counterbalance and turn to the right. So you see, the only way to do this, I couldn't even perform a stroke, even if I wanted to, turn with bringing my hands back and my hips, because this idea of contrary motion, meaning balance and counterbalance. See, as my hips turn to the left and right, my arms counterbalance in the opposite direction. So you can see all the strokes. You see that? The serve, the volleys, the backhand, the forehand. You can see it all in this motion. And so that's one of the first things we had to disprove to people was this idea that you can turn and load up, so to speak, because contrary motion is a fact. I mean, it's a law of nature. Kind of when the wind blows a tree, right? The bough of the tree moves a little and the branches push forward. And then as the bough comes back, the branches push back. So you get that sort of flag blowing in the wind. So that was one of the things we had to disprove, is the idea of loading up and this idea of contrary motion in the stroke. And then, like you said, the incline board sort of brings verticality into play. I realized, it was funny, Paul's dad had this trailer that he loved to hang out in. He was an older guy and he was a real intellectual type. Graduated Brown, really bright. He did a lot of writing and he would do it in this trailer. But his trailer was parked on an incline, like this. It really was. It was a fairly steep incline. And I used to go in there, before we invented the 8-board, I used to get in there and I'd stand, you know, with 1 foot up, and then I'd start practicing my strokes, because if you went up to the top hip, it pushed you down, and you had this incline, see? So I went up and it'd bring me right back down. So you felt that nice figure 8. And so literally almost the same time we invented the 8-board, I told Paul, I said, hey, give me a wedge. I want to put that on top. So by putting this on top, now when you turn to the right, you know, for a forehand, for a right-handed forehand, you naturally rise, right? And you come around the corner with your hips, and then your racket follows, see? So it brings verticality and challenges your balance slightly, but it brings that verticality into the figure 8, right? Because you keep just turning sideways, you could do this too. So that's not really a stroke, a complete stroke. So that's where the incline came in, and then it's great for serves, great for the throwing motion. I know all the athletes that throw balls, quarterbacks, pitchers, they all love the incline board because that really helps them feel that sort of roundness in the throw. So the incline board was a great addition. And then what happened after the incline board, this was just a couple years ago, I was kind of obsessed with this idea of verticality, and I realized, being a surfer, I realized, well, it's not really right just to have an incline on one side. So I was like, how do you have an incline on both sides? So I asked my partner and partner in crime, Paul Mayberry, to make me something that rocked. I said, make me something kind of like this right here that would rock to and fro. So now this product is fantastic. It's one of my favorite products for every stroke. Now this one, so now you can get that coiling up, and then as you hit, you level off. See that? Or if a player has trouble with balance, I just have them do the stroke and try and keep it flat, right? And just have them really focus on their hips. But in general, for the better players, I like them to actually push forward and then lay back, sort of the way a golfer, right? Golfer's like this, and as he hits, you notice his head lays back a little bit, right? It's a natural way to play golf. And you'll notice the same thing on tennis players. They come up off the ground, and that's because they're pushing down into their coil, and as they release, they come back up. So you'll see a lot of these guys, on the backhand especially, right? They'll get way like this, and then as they hit, they come up off the ground, or 1 foot will be off the ground and they'll kick it behind them like that. So I was really obsessed with Rios, the way he would do that. He was the first one I noticed. He would pick his back foot up, and as he hit, he would kick it behind him, lining him up to the 45, finishing the stroke. So this product is, I think, amazing. Even my top players, I know when I showed it to Mike Bryan, he was like, this is tough, you know? It's definitely a tough, challenges your balance quite a bit. So I really think this product is fantastic for the court. Once I get a kid to a certain level, they're on this most of the time. And then the one I told you about, we sold to the U.S. ski team. They bought a lot of these over here. They bought plenty of 8-boards, but they bought a lot of these because we wanted, this is kind of cool, we figured out a way to utilize tennis balls and recycle dead tennis balls. So this one's a lot tougher. All right, you get on this and you got to sort of get low. See that? but it shows that idea of contrary motion, and it gets you in your legs, and it teaches you how to discover your own center point, right? Your vertical axis. So this is a great product, and it shows if you're asymmetrical. Like right now I'm turning, but if I stay in one position and stay balanced, I won't. I'll come over and look at the camera here.
Yeah.
So if I'm symmetrical on both sides, see that? I can stay in the center. And all this movement, but my vertical axis stays true.
That's great.
So I guess another thing I was going to show you, and that is this idea of contrary motion, because the 45 is crucial. It's really crucial. And the figure 8 motion is crucial, but
Right.
you need to understand that contrary motion. So we invented a few little drills. See, watch my hips. See that? And I can keep a long rally going, and I don't even use my arms. And we do these other drills that are kind of fun. Anyway, so all these
Show
drills
off.
are based on this contrary motion.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you can see how dynamic all these products, I mean, collectively, they can be so dynamic when you start to add them up. And it's not just for tennis players. I mean, we have so many golfers that get on it, and we have quarterbacks that just throw countless balls off of it. Guys that are just arm throwers, and that are just not using their whole body to throw, and they're having challenges with their arm nonstop. We get them on this, have them throw it 50 times, they'll step off, and all of a sudden they're starting to integrate their whole body and the whole movement system. And it's just a simple way to teach and to get people connected to use your summation of forces of your whole body, and really start from the core, your center of power, and go out, up and down from there.
Yeah, it's sort of a hip-hand connection, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's kinesthetic learning, right? You learn kinesthetically through feeling it, how to produce this natural feeling, this body motion. It's like it's a body motion coordination device.
Oh, definitely.
And I was telling you before that, you know, even though I have coached some great players and continue to coach some great players, really the joy that I get is just as great coaching some people, some kids especially, but adults too, that have been frustrated with the game forever, right? Trying to watch the ball and follow through and bend their knees and all these linear, you know, tips and drills, and they just don't get any better, and they really feel bad about themselves. I mean, that's why I wrote the book, Secrets of the Natural Athlete, and how they can be yours, is because people are so frustrated, and I knew that frustration as a kid. I remember watching the top players in New England, and I played the Nationals once or twice, and I remember the top players. I used to watch them in awe and just go, gee, if I could just rally like that, you know, not miss, with all that power and all that control, and they looked really beautiful, and no missing. That's the key. That's the key. A lot of kids hit hard today, but it's not doing them much good if they're missing all the time. And I just am so happy now. This one girl I coached for the last year. A year ago, she was just petrified making her high school team. She was not really particularly athletic. I'm trying to be nice. And she had played tennis for 4 or 5 years and gotten nowhere. My first lesson with her, we tried to go short court, service line to service line. We literally couldn't get 2 balls over. I hit her one, she'd hit it somewhere else. I mean, no control, no style, really just looked very mechanical, and was incredibly frustrated and confused. And she just wanted to make her high school team. She was in the 8th grade, now she's in the 9th. She plays number 2 on her team. She's still, I wouldn't say a great athlete, but she looks like a great athlete. That's the thing. You can make yourself into a great athlete by understanding. You practice the figure 8 at home. You get that supple move between your hips and your hands. And the next thing you know, a life that would have been maybe just sitting behind a desk and fluorescent lights your whole life, now all of a sudden, and you know, being pigeonholed as a nerd or a geek or whatever you're pigeonholed as.
A non-athlete.
Non-athlete. And it's not a good feeling for a high school kid. I was lucky; I was a decent athlete in high school, but I know how my friends who weren't felt. So this can change your whole life. I mean, you know, because tennis and golf and all these sports you can do instead of walking or running. I mean, you can do something that's fun, and you feel good about yourself, and people admire a good game. Let me tell you, I mean, if you have nice strokes, I always tell my kids, my students, look, if you have a good game, people in the business world they'll think you're better than you are, because they'll say, well, gee, you know, you look so beautiful on the court. It takes discipline, and how did you get so good? And they think of you like we think of Federer. We all know Federer's got to be the greatest person in the world, right? Just because of the way he looks on the court and the way he acts.
Definitely.
You know, so I think sports is so important, especially sports like tennis and golf, where you don't have to be physical. It's not like football. You can be really tiny and play a great game of tennis. In fact, some of the best players have been very short. Lavers and Ken Rosewalls and Rios and Agassi wasn't tall, and Michael Chang. But so to me, it really is a great thing for humanity. And I guess one last thing you said about rehab, you know, the figure eight movement is a natural movement. It's the first move you make when you're a baby. I mean, how do you think you roll over in your crib? Right? If you're on your back, the only way to roll over is move your hips in a figure eight till you get the momentum to roll over. And crawling is that same figure eight, and you catch your balance with your hands as you wiggle in a figure eight. So they use crawling techniques to help people with Parkinson's, dementia, ADD. They're into this crawling technique. So a lot of people use our boards not only for physical therapy, but they use our boards for occupational therapy, special needs. So because when you swivel to the right, it activates your left brain, and vice versa. So as you do this continuous motion, it's very soothing, and it's very natural. It's something that you're born with, you know, and you lose as it's either beaten out of you by a coach, or you become once right-handed dominant, let's say, and you forget about your left side, and then all of a sudden your athleticism gets worse as you get older.
Well said. Well said. I mean, I can attest to that, being standing on it just for minutes, 15, 20 minutes, just getting in a flow. And it's kind of like getting off a boat. You like keep that rocking going. Well, you just keep that figure eight movement system flowing in your body. There's circulation. It's a flow of the universe. So you just feel great after you do it. It's a very low impact exercise, like a functional exercise for everyone. So I've had so much fun doing it and learning it. And then when you take it and put it in with a sport, a throwing, a hitting, you know, playing sport, whether it's golf, tennis.
Soccer players. I've heard soccer players.
Oh, well, that's how you kick.
know?
Yeah, and then on an angle, on an incline, and it just adds more dimensions to it, and that's what Jack's all about. It's just so fun. But one of the other great components too is talk to us about the Infinity movement and going into corporations and starting to work on training. It's because it's our whole premise is whole brain. We're one of athleticism programs, one of the few in the country that have an actual ambidexterity program, and we use products like the 8 board to tap into that figure eight movement system. And so share with us your Infinity movement for corporations.
Sure, we've used this with corporations because what happens, the biggest problem in the corporate world is stress. Obviously, stress is a huge problem, and lower extremities blood flow. Right, you're sitting like this all day, and for people that type a lot, carpal tunnel as well. But if you're at a desk all day on the phone and your legs are like this is a terrible, terrible position. And you get varicose veins and all these problems with sciatica and pelvic muscles. All these problems start to arise, and of course the stress of work as well. But stress is physical, not just emotional. So we've sold this product to large accounting firms and people that keep them. My doctor, she has one under her desk, and so they're working with patients all day, talking, consulting, and then these people, these accountants are working like crazy, especially during tax season. They tell me every hour, they say every hour they get up, and for 1 to 2 minutes, that's it, 1 to 2 minutes, they just do their figure eight, right? Some of them have to hold on to their desks. Some of the older people are maybe people that aren't that athletic, they'll hold on to their desk. But just moving like that, it really de-stresses the lower body and gets blood flow going. So, and if you use your arms, you get your arms moving as well, if you do the complete figure eight. So, yeah, it's just been great. Now we're really going heavy to the corporate world. One of our partners just joined the company. He's an HR director himself, and and is bringing this to the corporate world. So we think it's going to really help save a lot of American corporations and the people that work for these corporations, just because at least throughout the day, like I said, every hour they're thinking about their wellness. And I think that's another thing. The 8 board is so easy. Just to get on a simple plain 8 board, it's just so simple. You rotate from side to side, and whether you use your hands or not, but it's very simple, and you quickly discover your own balance and your center point. And people, we've sold hundreds to obesity clinics.
Right.
Imagine people 400 and 500 pounds. They've never felt weightless in their life, not since they were a teenager maybe. So now all of a sudden, because the board can withstand over 1,000 pounds, so all of a sudden these people are weightless, and they're moving, and they're getting flow in their body. And you know what it does? At least this is what they tell us. What it does is it gets them thinking about wellness, thinking about health, because they can move now. They can't touch their toes, but they have a product where they can actually feel somewhat athletic and feel what a natural athlete feels. So it's just, I can't say enough about it. I've been doing it for a couple decades, and still one of the best kept secrets in town, and I think it's getting out there, but I would like to get out there a lot faster, because everybody needs this. I mean, whether you're sitting at a desk all day, or whether you want to be a top athlete, or whether you just want to make your high school team, this can really, really help you negotiate space.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Jack. So
My
great
pleasure.
to see you.
My pleasure.
Unbelievable.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah, unbelievable insight. I'm going to grab a third ball and get on the figure eight movement system and start juggling here shortly. But you stay tuned. Remember, December 6th through the 13th, look at the calendar, find out when Jack Broudy slotted to, you could talk with him live. You can get an actual free lesson from him. So jump on, register, make sure you tell all your friends to register, and make sure you jump on and grab one of these 8 boards, because it's one of the best products in the tool shed that you could ever have.
Can I ask them if they'd like, they can get a free copy of the book, because they're here at the summit. Just go to therealspinontennis.com.
All right.
Therealspinontennis.com, and you can get a free copy of Secrets to the Natural Athlete. And I think you'd enjoy it, especially if you've got a child, or if you yourself are working on becoming a better athlete yourself. So.
All right, well, the perks of knowing Jack Broudy and being on the Go Beyond Summit. Thanks for joining us. Lots of love. We'll see you soon.